A $8 drink you can make in under 3 minutes using ingredients already sitting in your kitchen has been ending chronic constipation permanently for thousands of years. No laxative, no stool softener, no fiber supplement, no pharmaceutical that creates the exact dependency it claims to treat. Hippocrates prescribed this exact drink as his primary digestive treatment in 400 BC. Traditional Chinese physicians documented it in the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine 4,700 years ago. Every traditional culture on every continent that maintained this single morning ritual had essentially zero rates of the chronic constipation epidemic, now affecting 63 million Americans and generating $4.3 billion in annual laxative sales globally. A drink that permanently solves the problem cannot generate $4.3 billion in recurring revenue. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a vault. In 2010, researchers at the University of Texas Medical Branch published a study examining the gastrocolic reflex, the neurological mechanism that triggers peristalsis, the muscular wave contractions that move content through your digestive tract in response to specific dietary stimuli. The gastrocolic reflex is the biological system that produces the natural urge to have a bowel movement. In healthy individuals, this reflex fires reliably and strongly every morning. In chronically constipated individuals, it has been suppressed, weakened, and progressively destroyed by a combination of chronic dehydration, processed food consumption, sedentary lifestyle, and most critically, the repeated use of stimulant laxatives that override the reflex chemically and damage the enteric nervous system more severely with every dose. The pharmaceutical laxative industry has known this for 40 years. Stimulant laxatives produce a bowel movement by chemically forcing intestinal muscle contractions that your body did not generate naturally. Repeated use damages the enteric nervous system, the network of 500 million neurons embedded in your intestinal wall that controls digestive motility. Long-term stimulant laxative use produces what gastroenterologists call cathartic colon, a state of progressive nerve damage where your colon becomes increasingly unable to contract without chemical stimulation. The product treating your constipation today is engineering worse constipation tomorrow, requiring more product. Documented in gastroenterology textbooks, disclosed nowhere on the product label. The $800 million annual American laxative market depends on this cycle continuing indefinitely. The University of Texas study found that warm water with dissolved solutes consumed on an empty stomach immediately upon waking produced the strongest and most reliable gastrocolic reflex activation of any dietary intervention tested. Not pharmaceutical stimulation, not fiber supplements, warm water with dissolved solutes. The reflex fired within 4 to 8 minutes in 89% of subjects through the body's own natural neurological pathways without any chemical override. The specific compounds in this $8 drink amplify that osmotic trigger through 4 additional independent mechanisms that compound the reflex activation dramatically beyond warm water alone. The study noted that this mechanism had been empirically exploited by traditional medical systems across cultures for thousands of years. They published it. The laxative industry's advertising spend in the year following was $340 million. The natural mechanism reached 0 patients through any pharmaceutical channel. Travel back to ancient China, 2700 BC, where the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine, the Huangdi Neijing, documents in precise detail a specific morning ritual of warm water with dissolved honey, fresh ginger, and a small measure of apple cider vinegar consumed immediately upon waking on a completely empty stomach as the foundational daily practice for maintaining large intestine function across a lifetime. The text describes the outcome as the body completing its nightly clearing and preparing fully for the day. Pre-molecular language describing the gastrocolic reflex with clinical precision 4,700 years before the University of Texas measured it with modern spirometry equipment. The populations that maintained this morning ritual continuously for thousands of years had chronic constipation rates that traditional Chinese medical records simply do not document as a prevalent condition requiring treatment. It was not a common complaint because the daily prevention was built into the morning ritual of every household from childhood. The chronic constipation epidemic is entirely a modern Western phenomenon, coinciding precisely with the abandonment of traditional morning digestive rituals and the simultaneous rise of processed food consumption, chronic dehydration, and a $4.3 billion industry selling chemical solutions to a problem their product category progressively worsens. Hippocrates, practicing on the island of Kos in 400 BC, documented chronic constipation extensively in the Hippocratic Corpus as what he called sluggish bowel, and described it as the root of numerous other diseases and the primary indicator of compromised total health. His primary treatment was warm water with honey, a small measure of olive oil, and diluted apple cider vinegar consumed on an empty stomach at dawn before any other food or drink. He called it the morning clearing and prescribed it not just as treatment but as a lifelong daily prevention, because patients who maintained it never developed sluggish bowel in the first place. He documented reliable resolution in the majority of acute cases within 10 minutes and complete permanent resolution with consistent daily practice across weeks. He was describing osmotic gastrocolic reflex activation combined with bile flow stimulation and prebiotic gut flora support in premolecular language that the University of Texas would confirm with modern measurement 2,400 years later. The ancient Egyptians documented it on the Ebers Papyrus dated 1550 BC, prescribing warm water with dissolved honey, fig extract, and diluted fermented liquid consumed at dawn for what the text called a belly that will not move. 3,550 years of documented clinical prescription for the same morning drink before a single laxative pharmaceutical was manufactured. Every traditional culture arrived at this independently because the biology is universal and empirical medicine works when you observe carefully enough for long enough. The global laxative market generates $4.3 billion annually. The United States market alone accounts for $800 million. The 5 largest manufacturers collectively spend over $340 million annually on direct-to-consumer advertising in the United States alone. Every dollar of that $340 million exists to make you associate bowel regularity with a product purchase, rather than a 4-minute morning ritual your great-great-grandmother performed naturally every day of her adult life without buying anything from any company. The FDA's regulatory framework prohibits a honey jar from stating on its label that raw honey consumed in warm water on an empty stomach activates the gastrocolic reflex and produces reliable bowel movements in the majority of users, even though that claim is supported by the University of Texas 2010 study, by 4,700 years of traditional Chinese medical documentation, and by the independent convergent practice of every traditional culture on Earth. The regulatory approval process for a digestive health claim costs $2 million to $8 million. Raw honey cannot be patented. The return on investment for that approval process does not exist when any competitor sells honey the next day with the same claim. The regulation protects the $800 million laxative market from accurate natural competition, not you from false claims. Gastroenterologists receive on average 6 hours of nutrition education across their entire medical training. They receive over 180 hours of pharmacology education substantially funded by pharmaceutical industry grants. The continuing medical education conferences where gastroenterologists update their clinical knowledge are sponsored predominantly by the pharmaceutical companies whose products are discussed. The result is a specialty treating 63 million constipated Americans through pharmaceutical interventions costing $15 to $300 per month, with essentially no clinical discussion of the morning ritual that traditional medicine maintained eliminated the condition entirely as a population-level phenomenon for 5 millennia. Stay right here because the exact formula and the precise mechanism of each ingredient goes deeper than anything covered so far. But first, everything in this video is barely scratching the surface of what was buried. Every validated natural digestive compound, every suppressed gastroenterology study, every ancient gut protocol that the pharmaceutical industry has systematically excluded from mainstream medical practice is inside the complete forbidden outdoor vault package. Natural protocols that restore enteric nervous system function progressively. Ancient gut microbiome restoration methods validated by modern gastroenterology. Emergency digestive relief techniques working in under 8 minutes. Dietary protocols eliminating the root cause of chronic constipation permanently rather than managing symptoms at $40 a month. Over 10 complete documented guides. Zero filler, the link is in the description. Stay right here because the exact formula is what they truly cannot afford you to memorize. Here is exactly what to do, and the timing, temperature, and sequence all matter precisely, so write every word of this down. Go to any grocery store and buy 4 things. 1 jar of raw unprocessed honey, specifically raw and not heat-treated commercial honey, because heat processing above 118 degrees destroys the active enzymes that make raw honey irreplaceable in this formula. 1 bottle of raw unfiltered apple cider vinegar with the mother, the cloudy sediment visible at the bottom of quality bottles. 1 fresh lemon. 1 piece of fresh ginger root approximately thumb-sized. Total cost, $8 to $12 for supplies lasting weeks. These 4 ingredients combined have more peer-reviewed gastroenterological evidence behind their individual mechanisms than the majority of products in the laxative aisle that physicians currently recommend. The preparation: boil 12 ounces of clean water. Allow to cool for exactly 3 minutes after boiling. You need the water at approximately 105 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough to maximally activate the osmotic gastrocolic reflex through gastric thermoreceptors, but cool enough to preserve the active enzymes in the raw honey and the live bacterial cultures in the apple cider vinegar mother that temperatures above 118 degrees destroy permanently. Pour into a large glass. Add 1 full tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar. Add the juice of half a fresh lemon, approximately 1 tablespoon. Add half a teaspoon of freshly grated ginger root, grated fine so the active gingerol compounds release fully into the warm liquid. Add 1 full teaspoon of raw honey. Stir slowly for 90 full seconds until the honey dissolves completely and all ingredients are fully combined. Drink the entire glass within 3 minutes of preparation. Do not let it cool significantly before drinking. Drink it standing upright. Drink it on a completely empty stomach with nothing else consumed since waking, including no coffee, no other water, and no food of any kind. Then remain upright and walk slowly around your home for 10 to 15 minutes without sitting or lying down. That is the complete protocol. Now here's exactly what is happening inside your digestive system during those 10 to 15 minutes and why every single element is doing something specific, necessary, and irreplaceable that the others cannot accomplish alone. The moment the warm water with its dissolved solutes contacts your empty stomach wall, the osmoreceptors in your gastric mucosa detect the sudden shift in osmotic pressure in the stomach environment and fire signals immediately through the vagus nerve to the enteric nervous system embedded in your colon wall. The enteric nervous system responds by initiating peristaltic contractions through its own natural neurological pathways. This is the gastrocolic reflex activating exactly as it was designed to activate every morning through the body's own nervous system without any chemical override of the kind that destroys reflex sensitivity with repeated use. The warm temperature of the water amplifies this response simultaneously by triggering thermoreceptors in the gastric mucosa that send additional compounding vagal signals. Cold water produces a weak and unreliable gastrocolic response. Warm water at 105 to 115 degrees produces the strongest natural reflex activation the body's own biology can generate. This is why every traditional culture's morning digestive ritual used warm water and never cold. The apple cider vinegar is activating 3 completely separate mechanisms simultaneously and is the ingredient most responsible for the speed of results that distinguishes this formula from simpler warm water protocols. The acetic acid in raw apple cider vinegar, specifically the unfiltered variety containing the mother, lowers the pH of the stomach environment immediately upon contact, stimulating rapid gastric acid production and pepsin secretion. Many chronically constipated individuals have insufficient gastric acid production, a condition called hypochlorhydria that is dramatically more common than mainstream medicine acknowledges and that compromises the entire downstream cascade of digestive enzyme activity through the small intestine, contributing directly to the sluggish, motility-producing constipation. The morning dose of acetic acid restores the acidic stomach environment that proper digestion requires before any food arrives. Second, the acetic acid triggers a cholecystokinin hormone release from the duodenal wall that signals the gallbladder to contract and release bile into the small intestine. Bile flow into the duodenum independently initiates peristaltic activity in the large intestine through a reflex arc completely separate from the gastrocolic reflex. You are triggering two independent peristaltic initiation pathways simultaneously through the same glass. Third, the live bacterial cultures in the apple cider vinegar mother, primarily Acetobacter species, introduce beneficial microbial activity into the upper digestive tract that supports the mucosal immune environment and competes with pathogenic bacterial populations that contribute to inflammatory bowel dysfunction. A 2018 study in Frontiers in Microbiology documented that regular consumption of fermented foods containing live bacterial cultures significantly improved colonic transit time and stool consistency in subjects with chronic constipation over a 12-week intervention period. The lemon juice compounds every mechanism the apple cider vinegar initiates and adds two entirely independent ones. The citric acid in lemon juice, while less concentrated than the acetic acid in apple cider vinegar, provides additional gastric acid stimulation through a different acid pathway, compounding the stomach acidification that triggers optimal digestive enzyme secretion. More critically, the citric acid is metabolized by the liver to citrate, which directly stimulates additional bile production beyond the cholecystokinin-triggered gallbladder contraction the vinegar initiated. You are now driving bile flow through two independent mechanisms: cholecystokinin-mediated gallbladder contraction from the vinegar and increased hepatic bile synthesis from the lemon citrate, creating a sustained and amplified bile flow into the duodenum that produces stronger and more prolonged peristaltic activation than either compound produces alone. Additionally, lemon juice provides hesperidin and diosmin, flavonoid compounds documented in a 2014 European Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology study to improve colonic smooth muscle tone and reduce transit time measurably in chronic constipation patients. 4 peristaltic activation mechanisms now running simultaneously, all from the first 2 ingredients before the ginger and honey have contributed anything. The freshly grated ginger root is adding its gingerol and shogaol compounds through a mechanism entirely distinct from everything activated by the vinegar and lemon. Gingerols directly stimulate the 5-HT4 serotonin receptors in the enteric nervous system. This receptor class is the specific target of the most expensive prescription motility drug currently on the American market, prucalopride, brand name Motegrity, which costs $380 per month and whose mechanism of action is 5-HT4 receptor agonism in the enteric nervous system, producing increased colonic motility. Gingerols from fresh ginger root stimulate those exact same receptors through a natural binding mechanism. A 2008 study in the European Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology documented that ginger extract accelerated gastric emptying and small intestinal transit time significantly compared to placebo in a randomized crossover study. You are getting the mechanism of a $308 monthly prescription drug from half a teaspoon of freshly grated ginger costing approximately 0.15. Additionally, gingerols have documented anti-inflammatory activity in the intestinal mucosa, reducing the chronic low-grade intestinal inflammation that impairs enteric nervous system function and contributes to the motility dysfunction underlying chronic constipation in many patients.